Hello, I'm Rishit, and we'll be talking about, for the next 25 minutes, contributing to Kubernetes made easier than ever with Codespaces. That's a big claim, but in this talk, we'll see how we can simplify the process of contributing to Kubernetes. And something that has worked well for us, we have made a few PRs using GitHub Codespaces, and we'll also show some demos, not just slides. Hello, I'm Rishit. I'm a student at the University of Toronto, and Craig.
Thanks, Rishit. I'm Craig Peters. I am a product manager at GitHub, and I want to thank Rishit very much for inviting me to join him for this talk. I think my preamble to this is that the topic is really relevant to all the previous topics because we've heard a lot about succession and the need for bringing up new contributors. And in order to have new maintainers, you have to have new contributors. To have new contributors, you have to have people who, as we heard in this last talk, aren't afraid to try things. And what we found is that there are a bunch of inhibitors for that.
Sure. So most of you have contributed to open source, which is fun. And we all share a common passion for open source, but has it always been easy? So I would like to say that I'd like to ask a show of hands. How many of you have set up an environment to contribute to a project? Probably everyone. Yes, yes. And have you always done it flawlessly? No. We have not. We have spent countless hours debugging, making tests work, or rather one of the libraries for the test which has a wrong version. So that happens. So contributing and setting up specific environments can get hard. And this is just one of the architecture diagrams for one of the Kubernetes projects. And setting up the environment for something like this could be pretty hard. So this is also another example. I was trying to actually build GCC, and have you tried building GCC or CPython? If you have tried building it, you know it's a lot of work. Let's just leave it at that. This was actually me trying to build CPython and failing successfully. So this is also, I'd like to motivate this by going to the Slack link and...
Should I pull it up?
Sorry?
Should I bring up the Slack message?
Yeah. Let's boot up the Slack.
Let's see. That's going to be a challenge.
So a lot of the Kubernetes community talks with each other through Slack, and this was just one of the examples I saw on Slack quite some time ago, which motivated me to look into devcontainers and GitHub Codespaces too. So this is just something I saw in SIG docs. Pretty hard to set up the environment for SIG docs or contributing to SIG docs. Not everyone might feel the same, but definitely the case for a few systems. A lot of people had been facing problems with this, even the original message, the thread. So this can bar a lot of new contributors for making their first step, just because it's pretty difficult to set up a working environment. And so one other thing I had noticed was, this was actually the Kubernetes website. Setting up the environment for Kubernetes website, which is essentially Yugo. And think about what you would want to do if you wanted to build a KK. That would be an even bigger task. And I just showed some problems people were facing building K website. So one solution to this could be, how about I tell you about pre-configured dev environments. All of your dev environment is configured, ready for you to use, ready for you to build. How cool would that be? Wouldn't that be cool, Craig?
I think that would be awesome, Rashid.
Can you tell us more about that?
I think I might be able to. So As I mentioned, I'm a product manager at GitHub, and at the risk of a vendor push, I want to be very clear that what I'm working on is a product that is going to be made available to everyone. And we're going to be showing you sort of a preview of some hypotheses we have about how things we've learned about the struggles that people face when they're contributing to open source projects can be overcome, and to reduce the kind of fears that people have when they're new coming to projects, and also ways that we can codify the sort of mental practice that we have as maintainers and things that we have been doing forever, so that other people can easily take those things on, or more easily. Like, nothing's magic, but it's just a way to bring new people along. And so the tool that I'm working on is called Codespaces. What it is, let me start with a little confusion. Some people think of Codespaces as the same thing as pushing the dot in GitHub today, which brings up Visual Studio Code in the browser. Now, this is going to get a little confusing because we probably will reuse the dot later on when Codespace is available to everyone, because it's a nice shortcut that everybody knows, and replace just the Visual Studio Code that does not have a debugger, does not have a terminal, it doesn't have compute behind it. It just caches the code locally in your VS Code web so that you can do some contributions directly from the web. What Codespaces is it puts compute behind that. So it's actually a VM running a dev container that then allows you to take advantage of configurations that are in the repository. That's the thing way over on the far right, and that's what I'll probably spend the bulk of my time talking about today. But that configuration can allow you to have a specific environment set up for working in a repository or a set of repositories, so that two things. One is that you as a maintainer don't spend your time with people with basic steps on their own machines. How many of us have gone through a review cycle with people where they're struggling to run the local tests before moving a PR from draft or work in progress? Raise a hand. Yeah. Okay. Yep. That's time that actually isn't valuable for anyone. It's not valuable for you. It's not valuable for the new contributor. That's just pain. So one is get rid of that. The second is, as a new contributor, I don't want to have to read through the READMEs on 5 different repos that I don't know where they are. I don't know which ones matter for the particular work I'm doing. That should be a part of the project. And that knowledge, that know-how is actually mundane. It's not valuable to the maintainer, and it's not valuable to the contributor. And so the premise is that we should codify that. And that's what the configuration is here. What that does then is that triggers the whole chain of events all the way back to the left. So I've got extensions, the terminal, the tools, all the packages and dependencies that allow me to use the debugger, that allow me to get access to the source in whatever editor I want. So one thing I'll tease here is that today people equate Codespaces and the editors in GitHub with VS Code. Don't think of it anymore that way. Codespaces is a cloud-based environment that we are working to make sure you can bring your own editor to. We already support anything you can connect to a remote container via SSH, so Emacs. Anybody like Emacs? Vim? Anyway, there's not too many people there. I saw a Vim hand, so yes. Okay, so there's at least a few. But coming is much broader support for more editors. Come talk to me if you're interested in what those are. I can't announce it yet, but it's coming soon. So what does that look like? From a user's perspective, it means I go into a repository, I get one click. It's actually 2, and I'll show you that. But in theory, 1 click configuration of an environment. Because we integrate with dot files and things like that, it brings all your favorite shortcuts and aliases and extensions into the environment for you. It is the environment, it's actually really important. GitHub manages it for you, so we do everything from secrets management to cost management, so policies like timeouts and deletions, to making sure it's up and running, that your work is persisted between sessions. I'll demo that too. And really importantly, really importantly, the configuration that we're talking about here isn't just for the cloud environment. It works cloud and local. So you don't have to be afraid, like, well, what if GitHub's down? I can't do my work. Contributors can't do their work. The configuration, I'll show that too. You can run it locally. So we got demos. Let's do demos.
So now we'll get on to some demos, and yeah. So we have had configurations on a GitHub repository for quite some projects. I particularly added configurations for Kubernetes website, Kubernetes Python client, and kubetest 2 if you want to run all of that or build all of that. And Craig also has some nice demos which he'll now come up with. So first we'll start off with K website, which has shown to be a great place for beginners to contribute to. So I thought this would be pretty useful to demo, but you can also, of course, try out the other configurations. So I just went to the GitHub repository, opened up a code space, and this is already a pre-configured dev environment for me. The way I do this is I have a .dev container, which runs all the installations I need to do. So this is already configured with everything I need to do to build the website locally. And now I'll just start building the website locally. Oh, could you zoom in a bit?
Sure. Let's do that. Let's just set the screen size a little bigger. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Isn't it here? It should be here. Yeah, it's because we're sharing.
Oh, no problem.
No? We can just zoom in.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Should be better legible now, but should be better legible now. And now I'll not go through any of the build steps. I'll directly do an npm CI, and then I'll directly do a make serve, which I already know works well if I have done all the build processes properly for installing Hugo, installing the extended version of Hugo. If I've done all of that, I can follow the repository and see what it tells me to do. And it actually tells me to do make serve, which is what we are going to do now, because our environment is already configured with all we need. So the Mac keyboard is new to me.
Always good doing demos on other people's machines.
And we actually have it running. And while this connects to the forwarded port, what we'll try and do is show how a contribution would look like. So I'll just take an example, change something, see it building out in Codespaces, and then you should be able to do the same for your own PRs too. So let's just go to docs, and I'll probably change something really small. We don't want to change something really big right now. I'll just go to contribute. And instead of contribute to KH docs, I'll say contributor summit. Contributor summit. And well, this should build out properly. Then we go to the docs to see how it has built out. Interesting.
I got killed. Should just be able to tap. Let it roll load. And we'll jump to the next demo. Yeah, we got a lot of things going on here. Why is that not working?
It seems to be taking quite some time to load up.
Is the service running?
Yep.
Warning.
It's
There it goes. Now it loaded.
now it's running.
Took a little while for some reason.
So we actually made a change in docs/contribute. So let's just go to there and see the build.
No, go back. Go back.
Oh. Oh, yeah.
Right to the header.
So we actually got the change working. So a quick build. And so now, Craig, do you want to show one of the more involved demos? And I mean, you can feel free to experiment with other configurations we have. There's also kubetest too if you want to run that, the Python client. And now Craig will show an interesting demo too.
Thanks, Rishit. So what I'm thinking about is the life of the maintainer. So your life is working in lots of different repositories. You don't necessarily know all of those repositories all the time because you're not working in them all the time. But as a maintainer, you often have to work across repositories. And so getting kind of back up to speed and new stuff is always a challenge. So what I want to do real quickly is start a new code space on KK. So what this does is this button allows me to have a configuration that says, what kind of machine do I want? So in this case, KK is actually pretty big to build, right? Not everybody even has a machine that's capable of building it. So you'll see here I've got an 8-core machine. We've got access to a lot of different kinds of resources. This list is growing. You'll see here that I have chosen my branch of KK, which has a Codespaces dev container set up. I can choose where it goes. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off starting a code space. So what this is doing is not only is this provisioning of VM, starting a container that I have pre-built, which is why it will take less than 10 minutes. So it's essentially running all of the Docker build and set up creating a VM image in the background so that I, as a new contributor or as a maintainer who only comes to this environment once every so often, I don't have to wait a long time or do a bunch of manual steps to get everything up and running. It loads the environment, and on the back end, it's doing a git clone of KK. And in this case, I've configured it to also clone kubectl, but I can configure that to be any number of repositories that I need to be able to have access to. And then it brings up my nice little getting started with Codespaces, which I have here. And what does that do? That allows me very quickly to just pick a command. So to demonstrate the power of this like pre-configured environments, this is a cloud environment. I can just copy and paste a command. I have to allow pasting into the browser. And voila. Like, the idea is zero config as a user. Thanks, Dims. Zero config as a user. Like, I don't have to worry about what the versions of the tools are. And how does that work? What's the magic behind it? The magic is configuration as code, which we're all very familiar with for CI/CD, for infrastructure. What we've done is Docker files have actually done a lot towards moving us towards the idea of configuration as code for all kinds of environments. We've layered on top of that an open source spec called devcontainers, development containers. That spec defines a JSON file. So this was originally a part of Microsoft Visual Studio Code. The GitHub team has worked together with VS Code to extract the VS Code specific stuff right out of it and create an abstraction that works across multiple editors. So the idea is I have a configuration that wraps around my Docker files, my compose files, whatever I already have, and provides the metadata required to set up the entire environment, not just the editor itself. Right, so all of the dependencies, all the tools. So you'll see in here, I've got information about the Docker file. Obviously, I point to that, which contains the image. In this case, the Docker file actually is just pulling a Debian base image. And then I specify the run args because I want to be able to use the security options and I might want to be able to use seccomp, etc. All that stuff's optional. And then I want to determine how it should behave when I run certain ports. So for example, there's a bunch of tests that you run when you run Kubernetes tests that open ports. Codespaces will try to expose those ports just like Rishit was demoing, and you click on a browser and pop that up. You don't need to do that with the test, so I'm going to ignore that, right? Like that's a whole bunch of noise that nobody needs. And then dev containers have what are called dev container features. So these are reusable bits. In this case, I want to use Docker and Doctor because Kubernetes build requires Docker, and I'm sitting inside a Docker machine on top of we're talking layers on layers. I need Go, and I need a specific version of Go, right? And so I can then specify exactly what those are. But this is in a very kind of straightforward format. The only things that I've added for this particular environment that didn't already exist, and I'm working in the community to make these more common, are kind, etcd, and kubetest2. So in the future, I want to talk to y'all about how to best get those into the community to make those easy. And then, I just have a customization. Which file should I open when I start? So that's essentially the build there. I also have a repo that allows you to do stuff like, that's more of the maintainer side of things. I also have a repo here that allows you to one click get an environment up and running for somebody who just wants to play around. This is a totally different kind of thing. I don't need an 8-core machine just to run kind, right, and learn a little bit about Kubernetes. So this gives a different kind of playground for people to just kick the tires with Kubernetes, learn the basic tools, and we're working then with the community to turn this into reusable training. And this is where I think we have an opportunity to kind of standardize the workflow around how new people come into the community, get simple access to just the right tools with just the right configurations, and the time to joy should be much slower, exactly, and the pain for maintainers and people who are like trying to help mentor the next generation of contributors should be much lower. So, Rishit of 2 years from now shouldn't have to go through the same pain Rishit 2 years ago had to go through to get to where he is. I don't know why this is taking so long, but we'll get back. Oh, there, it came up. This is nice because it just allows me to, do stuff like kind create cluster right away, right? Like I don't have to worry about installing any of that. Maybe I don't have a pre-build on that one. But, boom. Boom, kind create cluster. And it's off and running. So that's the idea, is it should be super quick and easy to just get going. So we want to talk a little bit about what comes next. Just checking the time. I really want to have time for discussion. So what is our work in progress right now? There is a pull request that I want to make from my fork. So I have an issue already open to add a dev container configuration to KK. This is actually being done in combination with subcontribx related to some training that is being developed for new contributors that'll go on kates.dev. The next thing is I've started an issue, and I've got like a POC basically in my repo of the dev container feature for kind. Need to do the same thing for etcd and kubetest2 and any other set of tools that are needed that people want to be able to run end-to-end. What I didn't demo is I can actually run all the end-to-end tests, all the integration tests, all that stuff works in that code space for the fork that I have here. There's a bit.ly link if you want to go test it out, file issues, let me know how that's going. And then in the future, the idea is that everyone should have access to Codespaces. That's actually, as a product manager, that is what I'm working on. And I would then want to work with Kubernetes SIGs for Playground, for kubetest, SIG testing, and a bunch of other communities to make sure that, if this is the right thing for the community, that we get those things done and get some documentation updates done. What do you think about all that, Rishit?
That sounds great. I've also been working on, we already have an issue in K website to add .dev container configuration and GitHub Codespaces. I've been working on a PR for that. The demo which I showed today was kind of the PR, the PR in action. So yeah, that's some of the things we have been working on. And thank you so much for listening to us.
Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Okay. If there are any questions?
So if you had to guess, is this something that would be of significant effort or medium effort or small effort for like subgroups to set up if this is something that was decided to be moved forward with?
So that depends on your level of expertise with containers going in. My experience with the Kubernetes community is the level of experience is very high. And so it should be a matter of hours at most. It took me, because I'm all thumbs, and as you can see from my typing, I'm more of a PowerPoint engineer, that doesn't show in my slides, than I am a software engineer. So it took me about 3 days to do the config on my fork of KK. But I think somebody who actually knew what they were doing would be able to do what I did in like 10 minutes. I can walk you through it. It's pretty straightforward. And we're building tooling for people who, like there is already tooling in Visual Studio Code's extension for dev containers to create those configurations. It's kind of a wizard that walks you through the basic steps and gets you to a basic level. But we're also building tooling in GitHub.com to make that easier for new people too. But if you're an expert in containers, it's easy.
Is there a good resource to learn about the dev container concept?
Yeah, great question. I didn't even put that in my resource slide. So containers.dev, we had a nice little URL, is the kind of documentation page for the open spec for dev containers.
I'm sorry, we are a bit out of time.
One in the back.
Maybe last question.
Last question, yeah.
Hi, so I just had one question. So in case we want our Kubernetes cluster to also come with some other dependencies pre-installed, such as Helm or Prometheus, so will it be possible to also configure that when we are setting up a code space with any of the, like if you're choosing Kind or K3D, any other Kubernetes distro, to also have these additional dependencies already pre-installed?
Yes. There's actually an existing dev container feature for Minikube and kubectl. Or kubectl, depending on your preferences. But that already exists in the dev container community has been maintaining that. One of the things I want to work on is getting the maintenance of these things actually into the communities, because I don't believe that dev container community should be domain experts in each of those tools and the way in which they should be best consumed by consuming development environments. That's my next mission, is to get those into those communities. So Minikube and kubectl and others are already kind of there. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you all very much. Come talk to us.